back in Derby Square here with Andrew Bentley, who's the councillor for this area. And it's picking it up from the story that you've been going with the last few days, particularly again, because we covered parking in one of our interviews, but the business about the amount of places that are building potentially and lack of foresight potentially for parking, which is going to put more pressure on the road. Am I in the right area here?
Well, exactly. This time we're in parking zone D as opposed to parking zone W in our last interview. Parking zone D is Derby Square, goes up to Brisbane Street, Oxford Street and over to the terraces there. Has a parking capacity on street of between 250 and 260, we think.
Mm-hmm. So there's places there, there's over there that have got planning, which have got, well, that one's blank at the minute. Obviously that one's got a very small sort of bungalow on it, sort of thing. What are you worried about here?
Well, what's happening is we've got one scheme that's got approval from back in 2016-17, I think, which is for 3 houses.
It's been empty for a long time, that one, right?
It has, yes. But we've got 2 other applications at the moment that are in the planning process. Now, the one over there is they've all got double garages plus room to park off site.
That's good, isn't it?
That is good. We've got a house in Derby Road which is in a state of disrepair. It's going to be restructured and it's going to be extended and have 3 2-bedroom flats. Now, we've also got an application in the corner there at Vine Villa, the bungalow in the corner, and that's an application for 3 townhouses that mimic the style of Derby Square. And neither of the 2 current planning applications really there's any reason to object to them on any sort of parking ground, because they actually comply with parking policy. Mm-hmm. In that the one in the corner, the Vine Villa application, that's got 2 parking spaces to the rear, but they're both in garages. Now my concern is that there's a disconnection between planning permission being given and the parking aspects of it, and the issue of parking permits once the building has been constructed. So, for example, we have a theoretical parking demand for the flats of 2 per flat, but because it's an urban area, well serviced by public transport, close to amenities and centres of employment, they have a relaxation of 1 per flat. But those flats are big enough for 3 people. So potentially there is 9, but theoretically there's 3. That's where the disconnect starts to happen. And then when we look at the other houses where they've got double garages, 3 houses, 2 each with a double garage, that's 6 cars. But what happens when they decide to keep kayaks and whatever else in the garage?
But you can't go like that, because everyone could say that. They're doing their bit, aren't they? I mean, where do you stop on this? I mean, you want absolutely guarantees that no more than X amount of cars are going to park in certain places? The
problem is that if we don't do something to control this, it'll just get out of hand.
And it's out of hand already, surely, isn't it? You've already been on
that's why
the thing that there's not enough spaces for people, is it?
And that's why we need to mitigate it. We can't let it get worse. If they have got parking spaces and they have complied with the parking demand, then let's put in constraints on the number of parking permits that they're allowed, so that they can't use the garage to store their kayaks in and then park on the street.
Okay, now with you. So they could do anything with their garages, but they could still go and get a permit, and you want to stop that bit of it.
And there is a precedent for this. Both Rochester Court and Central Promenade, Central apartments on the promenade, both come with conditions that the people that live there are not entitled to parking permits because there is no parking on the parking capacity on the prom, and they do have off-street parking.
When does that happen though? When the planning's being sorted? I mean, in other words, they're quite okay now to do whatever they want because it hasn't been put down at this stage, or is it later on, or what?
Well, we did have a meeting. Councillor Watson and I went to see both the DOI and the Cabinet Office about this matter because this is the number 1 issue in the area. If you speak to everybody that lives around here, the first thing they talk about is parking. It's usually the second and third thing as well, and this is why it needs to be addressed, because if we keep allowing more and more and more cars, because we are increasing the capacity in the area, we're not increasing the capacity, but we are increasing the number of properties in the area. And remember, these big houses here, they're going to be 4-bedroom palaces with a lift and everything. I mean, these people don't drive little Peugeots. They're going to be taking up a lot of road space.
Ow! I mean, you just made some massive assumptions there, really. I mean, come on, people, cars and go together. People that don't want to park their cars too far away anyway. So let's face it, whenever possible, they will use their own resources, wouldn't they? Their own garages?
That's the idea, to encourage them to use their own garages, because that's something I hear again and again in the area. They've got garages and never use them.
Right. So where are we going with this one? Because I mean, you're digging away. This seems to be your topic now of interest. What can you actually change? Bigger than just what we're talking about here now. Ireland-wide or Douglas-wide?
Well, I'm looking after my patch here, really. What happens in Ramsey, I'll let the Ramsey commissioners fight that corner. But there are two documents that are up for review. The first one, when the area plan for the east came through, Claire Barber put in an amendment that the strategic plan was amended so that it was up to date. And certainly Appendix 7 of the strategic plan, which deals with all the parking standards, that needs to be amended, and this can deal with it. The second document is the Department of Infrastructure are doing a parking strategy that will try and bring parking strategy in Douglas up to date, maybe the whole island. They didn't go into details, but I fear that it will be a standalone document, and it's that classic thing of governments working in silos, that planning are working to one document that's provided by a Cabinet Office and the DOI are working on another document.
You don't sound very hopeful though there.
You've got to be hopeful. I'm not giving up. But yeah, no, I think there's really a few things that we should be looking for. First of all, delineating the areas where relaxations on parking actually apply, so it's not just a case of arguing. It's like, these areas are well serviced, we can have a relaxation. I think we need to take a look at houses of multiple occupation and work out what a theoretical demand is for a house of multiple occupation. Because some of these can get really out of control, where you've got 8, 9, 10 adults living in a building. They are all entitled to a parking permit. I think we need to look at restricting the issuing of parking to the theoretical parking demand that was on the planning application. And I think we need to start looking at restricting parking permits for people who have garages, so that maybe if they've got a double garage, then they've got to demonstrate that there are 3 adults with cars before they get a parking permit. We've got to start looking at these things. And then there's always the other big question in the area: what are we going to do about electric cars and charging? Because almost everybody here parks on the street.
Well, that's another can of worms you just opened up there. But anyway, you've got this list. We'll come back and we'll talk about it and see where you get.
Minister Harmer has been very receptive, so he's forwarded it on to his officers. We've had meetings with his officers, and fingers crossed we will see something in the review of these documents.